So if you're in a regulated industry, you know the word change is a big deal, right? We control it very, very carefully. But what happens when your systems can change all by themselves? That's the huge challenge AI brings to the table. And in this explainer, we're going to break down a framework for managing all of it. Model updates, data drift, you name it, so you can innovate but still stay firmly in control. And this quote really says it all, doesn't it? This is the bedrock of everything we do. Every single change, I mean every single one, has to be intentional. It has to be documented and it has to be approved. It's how we keep patients safe and our products top-notch. Surprises? Invisible tweaks? Nope, not in our world. But then, AI comes along and throws this massive curveball at us, and it's a big one. What happens when your system's behavior changes, but you haven't touched a single line of code? Maybe the model's output just shifts because the data it's seen is different. This right here, this challenges the very idea of what change even is. It forces us to completely rethink our control strategy. I mean, how on earth do you govern a system that can basically evolve all by itself? Okay, so where do we even start? Well, the answer begins by redefining the problem itself. We have to accept that in the world of AI, change is so much more than just code. We've got to broaden our view and look at all the different ways change can sneak into our systems. So, what are we talking about here? When we say AI change, it's not as simple as just swapping out a model version. Just look at this list. We're talking about everything from updates to the prompts we feed the model, to how people are using the system, and even really subtle shifts in the data coming from other places. Any one of these, literally any of them, can change how the system behaves. And if the behavior changes, you better believe our change management process has to kick in.
All right, let's dive in. We'll start with the most obvious one, the one we're all probably most comfortable with, model changes. These feel a lot like the software updates we're used to, right? And because of that, they're usually the easiest for our validation teams to get their heads around. So you might be upgrading to a new foundation model, or maybe you're deploying a freshly fine-tuned version. These are really clear, specific events. But, and this is the most important takeaway here, you can never, ever assume backward compatibility. Just because it's a newer version doesn't mean it's safe. Every single one of these updates demands a real, formal impact assessment to make sure it still does what it's supposed to do. Okay, so model changes are the obvious ones, but now let's talk about what are, without a doubt, the most underestimated updates: data changes. These things are happening all the time. They can be super subtle, and wow, can they be impactful.
Just think about it for a second. A new data source gets plugged in, or maybe the quality of data from another system starts to degrade. It could even be something as simple as seasonal business cycles altering the patterns in the data you're feeding the model. None of this involves changing the AI system's code, right? But it can absolutely dramatically change its outputs. And that is precisely why drift detection isn't some nice-to-have dashboard metric. No, it's a fundamental requirement for change management.
And that brings us to our final category, which might just be the most powerful and honestly the riskiest lever for change: configuration. You can think of these as all the knobs and dials of the system, the parameters, the rules, the prompts that tell the AI what to do and how to think about information. I mean, a tiny, tiny tweak to a prompt template, a small adjustment to a confidence score cutoff, those can cause massive shifts in how the system behaves. And that's exactly why you just can't treat these configurations like some simple user settings. They absolutely have to be version controlled, they have to be reviewed, and they have to be approved with the exact same seriousness as the source code itself. Okay, so we've established that a lot of things can count as a change now. So the big question is, does every single one of these need a full-blown, painful revalidation process? Well, the good news is, not necessarily. The level of rigor you need to apply really depends on what the system is actually doing, what its role and authority are. And this is where we draw the line in the sand. On one side, you've got assistive systems. Systems that just provide information or make suggestions to a human, and that human makes the final GXP call. For those, a change in behavior might just need a limited reassessment. But the second that system starts to directly influence or automate a GXP process, that's a whole different ballgame. Any change in behavior there demands a formal revalidation. It's simple. The system's authority dictates the rigor. So how in the world do we manage all this in a way that's structured and, maybe more importantly, auditable? Well, we can use a really helpful visual framework. It's called the IT/OT control plane, and it basically gives us a map for our system boundaries and, crucially, our control gates.
All right, let's take a look at the whole map here. I know it looks like a lot, but don't worry, we're going to break it down. You can basically see three main layers. Down at the bottom, you've got the evidence and audit plane. Think of this as your system of record. It captures everything, every log, every piece of evidence, every change. Then, in the middle, is the execution plane. This is where the work actually gets done. You've got your IT systems and your OT systems, like manufacturing equipment. But for this discussion, the layer that matters most is the one at the very top, the control plane. This control plane, this is where all the human governance happens. See those highlighted boxes, the approval gates and change control? These are not just steps in a workflow. They represent the formal, human-driven process where we assess changes, document them, and give our official approval before they can ever touch the systems down in the execution plane. This is the right way, the compliant path for any change to follow. Now, look at those red lines. We need to talk about these because they show a super common and really dangerous failure pattern. This is what happens when a change completely bypasses that control plane we just talked about. Maybe it's data drift that no one is monitoring, or a change to a prompt that wasn't version controlled. And it directly changes how a system on the factory floor behaves. These uncontrolled paths, they're totally invisible to governance, they leave zero audit trail, and they are a massive source of audit findings and regulatory risk. All of this brings us to a really crucial shift in mindset. You know, in the traditional software world, if you're revalidating something all the time, it usually means something's wrong. But with AI, it's the complete opposite. Frequent revalidation isn't a bug, it's a feature. It should be seen as a sign of discipline, a hallmark of a mature, well-controlled AI program. And what does that discipline look like? Well, it really comes down to a simple, repeatable process. For every single change that goes through those official approval gates, your team has to be able to answer these 5 questions. What changed? Why did it change? What behavior might be affected? What new risk are we introducing? And what evidence do we need to collect to prove the system is still okay to use? And like we saw in that diagram, trying to skip this assessment, well, that's taking one of those uncontrolled paths, and that's just not an option. Seriously, let this sink in for a moment. Revalidation isn't a failure. It's the very thing, the mechanism that lets us safely evolve these powerful AI systems. It's the process that makes sure a system that's always learning and adapting stays aligned with its validated intended purpose. It's not a bug. It's a feature of a program that's built to last. Okay, before we wrap this up, I want to be super clear about something. What we've done here is walk through the mechanics and the big ideas behind AI change management. The goal is to get your teams ready to think about this stuff responsibly. But what this explainer does not do is define your specific SOPs or give you the green light to deploy anything. That responsibility, as always, stays with your organization's quality unit. So let's end on this thought. Your AI systems are going to evolve. That's not a maybe, it's a certainty. The only real question you have to ask yourself is this: are your change control processes, your governance frameworks, and your team's mindset ready to evolve right along with them?